So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
See how she looks. How does she look? Assertive,
Kamala
looking him
Harris.
right in the eyes.
Let's have a good debate.
Walks right up to him.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's
Confident,
an honor to have you both
poised,
here tonight.
smiling.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year, because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places.
They're taking in billions of dollars from China.
When I had it, I had tariffs, and
when
yet
I had
no
it,
inflation.
No inflation.
Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans.
Look at that, though, the alpha
and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with
confidence, bro.
Look at it.
Look at the way she's looking at him.
Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality.
Oh, she's locked in.
And we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
Oh,
and
she's
what
locked in.
we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas.
Oh, she's locked in, bro.
That's some bad. But it makes no difference.
Those are the eyes of a killer.
I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows
I
what
feel
I'm going to
great.
do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's
I love
ever
that
seen
she's
anything
staring
like
at
it.
him. Like,
We
I
made
think that's
ventilators
strong.
for the
Like,
entire
she's
world.
locked
We got
in.
gowns, we got masks,
is
we did
hungry.
things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Even if
Vice
you
President
get rid of the
Harris,
COVID dip and the COVID.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America.
True.
What Goldman Sachs has said is that
Yes.
Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine
Yes.
would strengthen the economy.
Yes.
What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan
Ooh, that's his
would
alma mater.
actually explode the deficit.
That's his alma mater.
16 Nobel laureates have described
she's trying to rattle him.
his economic plan as something that would
That's a good little
increase
jab.
inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those
Ooh, she
professors,
made- see
the
it
top
right there.
professors,
She-
think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan.
Perfect.
It's a
She
plan
baited
that's
him.
going to bring up
Perfect.
our worth, our value as a country.
He mentioned
It's
that
gonna
school
make
that he
people wanna
graduated
be
from
able to go
came out and
work,
endorsed her plan.
create jobs and create a lot of
He's like,
good,
well, that's just
solid
stupid.
money for our country. And just to finish off,
he's rattled.
She
Ooh.
doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years.
China.
I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like him, they should have gone out and they should have
Oh my
immediately cut
God,
the
I
tariffs.
love her
But those
demeanor.
tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take
Fully
in
locked eye
billions of
contact?
dollars,
That's like-
hundreds of billions
Man,
of
I
dollars.
love that.
I had no inflation, virtually
In the
no
Biden
inflation.
debate, he was just
they had
like-
the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't
Definitely
go out
not.
and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in
This
place.
is one
So
of the
how do you
things that she
respond?
has to be careful
Well,
about.
let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize
Oh
their
my
military.
God, she's doing so
Basically
good.
sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing.
She's doing
Focusing
really
on
good.
what we need to do to support America's workforce. So
She's
that
doing
we
really,
don't
really
end up
good. No,
having
like,
the-
death
on the
blows
short
yet,
end
but
of the
she's
stick
really, really
in
doing
terms
really, really
of
good right now.
workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. "Thank you, President Xi!" exclamation point. When we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump.
Oh, and he's going to get rattled
They
here.
bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will
Oh my
be the
God,
end
she
of our
looks so
country.
confident.
She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21
Oh my gosh,
million
she's
people,
doing
not
so
the 15
good.
that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And
She
that's
went in
bad
with
for
a
our
game
economy,
plan of
too.
trying to
You
rattle
mentioned
him.
Before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to
And you can
our
tell, like,
economy.
the body
They
language,
have, and she
this
has
is deliberate.
destroyed
She wants
our
him to look
country
at her
with policy
smirking and
that's
smiling
insane. Almost
and get under
policy
his
that you
skin.
say they have to hate our country.
President Trump. Thank you. Lindsay.
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted
Let's
that you were
do
able
that.
to kill Roe v. Wade.
Yes.
Last year, you said
talk
that you were
about it.
proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, "I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks." But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay.
Please
And that's
dismantle
not
this.
okay with
Please
me.
dismantle
Hence the
this.
vote. But what I did is something.
I want her to be
for
like,
52
Donald, do you
years,
hear
they've been
what you're
trying to get
saying?
Roe
What
v.
you're saying
Wade
is insane.
into the
I want her to,
states.
like, you know,
And
boom.
through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85%
Yeah,
of
he said the governor of
Republicans do.
West Virginia,
Exceptions.
actually.
Very important.
He fucked up that.
But
He's
we were able
rattled.
to get it, and now states
meant the governor
are
of Virginia.
voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican,
Why was I
liberal,
even nervous?
conservative, they all wanted this
I
issue
wasted
to
that
be brought back
Xanax.
to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. And now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now.
Oh,
It's
she's
not
going to
tied
get
up in
after
the
him on
federal
this one,
government.
guys.
I did
Just
a great
wait.
service in doing it.
She's
It took
cooking up
courage
something
to
right
do
now.
it.
Just
And
wait.
the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President,
she
I want
did
to
the
get your
fact check.
response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade.
Got him.
They did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, oh, man,
she just nailed that.
I'm not signing a ban.
Nailed that
answer.
answer.
To sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states. And the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart. And they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to your desk?
Well, I won't have to because, again, 2 things.
No. Press him on this.
She'll go back to
he doesn't want to answer this question.
It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close
Somebody
to it.
needs to press him on this because he doesn't want to answer the question. It's a liability for him.
Student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D.
Ooh, that's not good.
I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government, and we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade, and as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening.
Yes.
It's insulting to the women of America. And
Yep.
understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion ban.
This is what I wanted from Biden.
Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women, who
I wouldn't
are
say that Trump is
working 1 or 2
unraveling. Let's
jobs,
not take it that
who
far.
can
I think
barely
he looks
afford childcare
slightly
as it
rattled
is,
right now. Abortion
have to
stuff is
travel
not
to another
comfortable for him.
state, to get on a plane sitting next to strangers, to go and get the health care she needs, barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
She'll have a good answer for this. She's ready.
Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's
the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v. Wade,
Answer the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th
You're not supposed to answer.
month, the 8th
I thought they
month,
were supposed to ask questions.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor.
Oh, they're
former
unmuting the
governor
mics now,
of
I guess.
Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside, and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country.
I wish you would have aggressively fact-checked him on the Northam quote.
Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June,
is a tough
President Biden
line for her.
tough
She's
new
got to
asylum
navigate this
restrictions.
carefully,
We
but
know
she's
the
for
numbers
sure
since then
prepared.
have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate,
she was ready for this answer.
came up with a border security bill, which I supported.
Yeah, I told you she would do this.
That bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to
it
help
just
those
mutes-
folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job.
Just immediately mutes the criticism. We tried to do a bill, you killed it. This is the perfect answer. Perfect answer.
The United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill.
He's not going to have a good answer
for this.
this.
Why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter.
Yes.
He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion.
Ooh, she's going to rattle him.
Yes! And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams,
surgical with this bitch.
And your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank
Watch,
you.
that's going to bug him.
On that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border?
First, let me respond as to the rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go.
Here it is.
And
yes.
the people that do go, she's bussing them in.
She
and
baited him. She's baiting him, guys. She's doing it. She's baiting him.
Showing them in a different light.
He's so easy to bait.
She can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in.
Oh,
they're
my
eating
God!
The cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance.
She's a little puppet master. She's got him right now.
Success will end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals.
Thank God they're fact-checking, bro.
Within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from television.
But the people on television saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formally worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a four-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit.
Watch him
His
squirm.
Former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or bad jobs.
Doesn't make him look good.
I fired them.
I mean,
they
yeah,
never
this
fired
is just
one person. They
she's
didn't
baiting
fire
him. She is
anybody having
she
to
is
do with
baiting him.
Afghanistan and the Taliban and the
She is
13
systematically
people
baiting him.
whose-
I mean,
whose
she's just
were
everything she's
killed
doing is working
viciously
on
and
him.
violently killed, and I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the Vice President has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say
she's doing really good, guys. This is really good stuff.
With local police. Yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals
I have to say, the debate strikes me like I think she's doing great, obviously. But I don't think that so far this debate is like changing any votes.
For them to allow, and I think they probably did it because
she would have to like murder him for that to happen. I don't think he's having a good night. I think she's having a good night. I think she's having a really good night.
There's never been anything done like this at all.
But I haven't seen like a death blow yet. You know what I mean?
Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof.
I mean,
despite
no, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. Fact check him on that.
Crime in this country is through the roof.
No, it's not.
And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime, and it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice President Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud.
Thank God for the fact checks. My God, thank you so much for the fact checks.
It turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich. Coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big
She's doing everything I asked her to do, guys.
Criminal sentencing. And let's be clear.
She's doing everything I asked her to do.
On the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law.
She is her.
And respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000
You guys heard me
agents,
ask to,
get this,
like everything
on the
that,
day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts.
You guys heard me ask for her to do this so many times in the last like month.
In this race, it is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will
He's going
win
to get
the rest
fact-checked
of the
again
appeal.
here.
And
They're
you
going to
saw
fact-check
that
him
with the
again right here.
decision that
Watch,
came
watch,
down
watch,
just
watch.
recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out.
She's working him like a puppet
and they
master.
Used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
You guys understand?
Thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization.
You guys understand she's playing chess right now, right?
Let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place.
I understand she's playing chess right now, right?
The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate,
her prep team.
I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States.
It's obvious she did a lot of prep here.
The Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice President
to stop
Harris.
him.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy.
Oh my God.
I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia
She's dog walking him. She is dog walking him. She's got him triggered.
Vice President
He
Harris,
is triggered.
in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your
I think she'll have a good answer for this too.
You supported decriminalizing
She's
border
prepared for all these
crossings.
questions.
Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy, so we
everybody has to defend flip-flops. Everybody. I mean, everybody flip-flops, and so
had the
it's how you defend it.
Increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work, to say we are going to work with the private sector and home
defends herself and throws a jab at him. This is, she is
homes by the end
playing
of my first term.
Chess
my work
right now.
That is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader,
I think she watches the stream.
is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens.
Bait. She baited him again. She baited him again. She baited him again. A tiny fraction,
and I built it into many,
He's
many
the easiest man in the world to bait.
Many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing
say
at
this
it,
too.
Okay, they're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out.
Oh.
Wait a minute, I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please.
I'm speaking.
Does that sound familiar?
Don't lie.
She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis. She went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing.
She's got to be careful not to get rattled herself here, right? So she's got to stay composed.
I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment
to.
that
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there.
She needs to bring the heat here, guys. She needs to be so aggressive here. This is where she goes for the kill shot right here.
Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
Great question.
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically.
Why did it take you 3 hours?
On the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her.
She should say, you're the reason she got shot.
But
that's what she should say.
This group
Come on,
of
I'm
people
manifesting
that
it. I'm manifesting
so
it.
badly.
Kamala!
I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people?
I think that's east.
She allowed to pour in. She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar.
Blame him for Ashley Babbitt.
Because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, well, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because
it's your fault she died.
What a bad job they've done. What about those people?
I'm manifesting
when are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America, they're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world, and crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just ask you,
David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis?
The question was, do you have any regrets?
Or in Seattle, they went into Seattle, they took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask you.
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi,
Kamala.
and the mayor
This
of
is where
Washington,
she needs to go for the kill shot.
And the mayor put it back in writing, as
this
you know.
This is a big opportunity
said,
for her to land a really
very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
Here it comes. Come on.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day,
I forgot
the
that,
President
actually.
of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured. And some died.
Yes.
And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason.
Yes.
But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country.
She's targeting never-Trumpers here.
To stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law.
This is really good.
And to end the chaos.
This is really good here.
And to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking.
I don't love this because it's
Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back.
I don't love that, but whatever.
Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
I think that could have been a little bit stronger, a little bit better.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every
You said it was very fine people. You can say whatever you want, but you said that shit.
Up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. He
insults her and she just looks poised. She just looks really poised. She doesn't let it rattle her.
You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock.
She insults him and he takes the bait and does this shit. He's starting to turn red, too.
If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal.
He already did a executive order, Trump. Where were you?
Those people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're
I would have
living
wanted to see her like insist on replying there. I wanted her to be a little bit stronger on that. But that was a good answer, and she did a good job of targeting never Trump people. So there's a tactic there, and I respect that. I wanted to see like a little bit more, you know.
You lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I said that sarcastically. You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically.
Not good for him.
There's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016.
This is bad for him. You know, this is bad for him.
The election, people
saying there was fraud is just not,
about an election.
It's what lost them a lot of those races in 2022.
We need, and we have to have it. We have to have borders. And we have to have good elections.
It's not good for them.
Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out,
I love this moderator, bro.
You and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they said we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said
He's
we
doing
didn't
his
have
job.
standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders.
Yeah, she's baiting him again. She's baiting him again. Oh my goodness. Bro, she is doing so good.
And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men.
There's
they
the bait.
call him a strong man. He's a tough person.
There's the bait.
Smart.
Bro.
Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look.
That construction started on his watch.
Said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy.
She prepped for this one, too. She prepped for this one, too. I promise you.
They threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14
That's not going to rattle her.
They threw him out. She got
That is not going to rattle her. I promise you.
When she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. and now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think we're going to do very well.
She prepared for that too. Watch, here we go.
Now to the Israel-Hamas war
just let it go.
And hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself.
She's going to I hope she references a news report that Trump called Bibi and pressured him to not take a deal.
Respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain.
She knows how to answer this question. I'm not even worried.
There's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now.
Oh God, what's
Israel
Hassan saying right now?
has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters.
There's going to be a Hassan clip for this tonight, I promise you that.
True. Far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel.
He's going to say some crazy, like Israel's not going to even exist if they win.
We can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well,
Russia?
Never,
this is
there was
Israel.
no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed
He's talking about Russia.
Of people when you add it up. Far worse than people understand what's going on.
He's not at his best.
But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel.
A bitch.
If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened.
There it is.
Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror, and they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President,
can't do that. That's illegal.
You hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy.
Weak. There it is. Yes.
Well known
Look at the bait. Look at the bait.
He admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known.
There's more bait. He's not going to stand for that. Excuse me.
That he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why.
Oh, that's
so
a
many
blow to the gut right there.
You have worked with
he is going to flip the
you are a disgrace.
Out.
That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down.
Dude, he pivots to immigration every single answer, bro.
Said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2,
none of this
the
is
biggest
true.
pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe, because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News
presidential
debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
I mean, if we're going to give her a grade right now, I'm going to give her an A-. There's a couple things that I wish she would have been, you know, she has her strategy, like she and her team. I think it's pretty obvious, like it's really obvious that her prep was to look very composed the whole time. So we haven't seen her get like really la 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 la. It's like she's had some really solid shots at him, but she's said it in a kind of calm demeanor, assertive but calm. It's really obvious that her goal was to make him look rattled and her look composed. And especially with the dynamic being a man and a woman here, with a woman keeping composure while he's looking rattled, while he's getting upset, while he's getting triggered, while he's taking the bait. So far, she's almost no notes. It is obvious that this is playing out pretty much exactly how her prep team, like I guarantee you her prep team is watching this from the green room and they're just, you know, very proud. She's doing the thing. She's doing it. There wasn't a single time that he didn't take the bait. Not a single time. And you know that his debate prep, that his team was trying to get him to stay composed. That was their number one goal in their prep, was don't let her rattle you. Don't let her get under your skin. Stay calm, stay poised. But it's Trump. He is an insecure narcissist. He cannot help himself. He physically cannot help himself, especially when a woman is taking these shots. He had no chance of staying composed. I saw some people say that she looked a little nervous in the beginning. I didn't really see that. I mean, you guys got to consider, like, again, think about this. You were the vice president 8 weeks ago. There was no indication that you were going to step up and be the nominee. None. And then 6 weeks ago, Biden drops out, endorses you, and you take over the ticket. Your whole life has changed. You have more attention on you than you have at any point in your life. You have more attention placed on you than 99.9999999% of human beings will ever experience. And that is a ton of pressure. So you can be a seasoned prosecutor. You can be a former district attorney of one of the most major metropolitan cities in the country. You can be the attorney general of the most populous state in the entire country. You can be a United States senator and go through all of the high pressure situations that were necessary in order to get to those positions before. But none of that compares to the kind of scrutiny, attention that she has had to go through being the nominee for the party now. And she's a human being. And so there were, you know, some people would crumble from that pressure. And at every step of the way, and tonight, especially tonight, she has demonstrated that she thrives in that kind of a high pressure situation. I would give it an A- so far. 2 or 3 mild critiques, but an A-. And I give him, you know, I mean, I don't think, guys, like so far, I don't think Well, I don't know. I mean, I like, to me, I'm looking for like a disastrous kind of a thing that could possibly change votes. I don't know if I've seen that yet, but she's definitely demonstrated that she is up to this task.
Welcome back to this historic ABC News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more, because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they
this
like
could be an effective
people.
line for him. I mean, it's nonsense, but
take a look at what's happening.
She has to, you know, she's going to have to respond strongly.
275 billion. They're into 100 to 150.
He gets to play pure offense because we know we don't know what would happen if he was president. And so he has the benefit of saying like, oh, he can say something like, oh, it wouldn't have happened, and people might believe that, right? Because you can't prove or disprove it.
They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin. Hasn't spoken to anybody.
So now she's going to talk about how he is not respected.
It's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become
president. He set her up for her to say, like, they laughed at you at the UN. I hope she says that.
What I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left,
this is a silly answer.
Unfortunately, left because
I do think she's chomping at the bit here because she has some really good attacks.
After I left, when I saw him building
she
up
wants
soldiers,
to take them.
He did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's
alive. That'll go over well with the MAGA crowd. I mean, I don't think it's going to work on
do you believe
centrist
it's in the
voters.
U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this
There's
to
some
Vice
opportunities for
President
her to
Harris.
really like take him to task here.
Support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as commander-in-chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me.
There you go.
I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here.
A good answer.
I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense.
Support for Ukraine is still popular in this country. So I think this is a winning issue for her.
The ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean.
Yes.
Because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine.
Yeah, you won't stop there.
Why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO.
The jabs, the tactical surgical jabs are so good.
The ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Oh, really good
answer. Both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier. And please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow much happier than he is right now.
I think that was good for him. That was a good little zinger there.
Thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that.
Don't let it rattle you. Don't let it rattle you.
Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate.
She needs to figure out on the fly that he was
later, he
waiting for her to interrupt him so she could use her line on him.
They said was
so I think she needs to adapt and just not interrupt.
They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin. And she
that would be my advice.
And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you.
Putin did the invasion.
You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice
you
President
bring up
Harris,
something?
have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify?
Vice President Harris?
Yet again,
have you ever met Vladimir Putin? I'm sorry, I'm doing timestamps.
Coming from this fellow, and that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is, it has been about standing as America always should. As a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk
about
good
answer there.
It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you. Otherwise, we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs.
Yeah, I mean, for like Haley voters that care about our NATO allies, I don't think that's good for him. You know,
a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down.
That's true.
He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, get this. And the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor
she was ready for this question, boys.
Where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to
Did she almost just
Camp
curse?
David because he does not again appreciate the role
Did she almost just curse?
and responsibility of the president
I swear
of the
to God,
United
I think she almost said
States
this.
to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban.
So she forced him to be on defense here instead of attacking the withdrawal.
They don't bother doing that.
She's playing chess, guys.
Wrong people all the time. But I got
so now he's defending what he did with the deal instead of attacking her. He's using his time to defend himself.
He is still the head
This
of
is
the
smart.
Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo.
That's a lie.
It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was
he's lying about that.
Getting out. We would have been out faster than
we never had an 18-month stretch where service members didn't die in Afghanistan. He's lying. It's a lie.
Behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish,
wasn't our equipment.
They blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn
this was going to come up.
And now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm
asking.
I
don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black,
God.
and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated
real estate mogul
because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad.
It's just a stupid way to make the point, you know?
Thank you. Your time is up.
Like, there's a way to make that point, you know?
Briefly.
But just saying she is
Clearly,
Biden is just a weird thing to say.
Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who
and she handled it really well.
In what
he gave her
possible.
that. He gave her that.
Brings a sense of optimism.
He just gave her that by saying something ridiculous.
We can do,
you know?
instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development.
These aren't bad answers, but she's a little less polished in the last like couple of answers. They're not bad answers, but her delivery was better before.
American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers.
She knows the debate is wrapping up, and so it's smart for her to like put the policies out there to finish that way, because these policies that she's proposing poll well.
Belittling and name calling.
The $50,000 tax credit for small businesses polls well. The $25,000 for homeowners polls well. So
let's turn to policy, please.
She has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she has a plan to
not
allow fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's what her plan is until just recently.
I just need to respond. The former president has said something twice that I need to respond to.
I'm sorry. We're going to move on, Vice President Harris. President Trump, this is now your third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Correct. Last month you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot?
He failed the repeal of ACA. This is another like bad question for him.
Politically, it would have been good to
these moderators,
let it rot
God
and
bless
let it
them.
go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people,
I guarantee you, this is going to be the biggest complaint that we're going to see tomorrow is that they're going to blame the moderators that he had a bad night.
I mean, about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And
that's bad.
Concepts and options
you don't have a plan for health care?
We have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not-too-distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well,
wow, that was, I think that was like one of the worst moments for him.
Over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options, but
that was
what
bad.
we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking.
Wow, I mean, I'm not the president. What do you mean? You're running for president. You don't have a plan?
Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate, and the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged.
That was so bad. The concept of a plan, I think, was that was the worst moment for him. That was so bad.
The late great John McCain, I will never forget that.
That was really, 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 really bad.
And said, "No, you don't."
What an amazingly stupid thing to say.
No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the
She's targeting those Arizona voters here. That's smart too.
The ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight. You remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice President Harris,
in terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
She made a mistake. At number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going.
Let's get those Arizona voters.
And you know what?
Let's get those Arizona voters.
Than Obamacare. Much less money. But
another really good bait. It was,
private
bro,
insurance
she baited him
for people,
again, man.
Private medical insurance That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance.
Yeah, they're gonna blame the moderators for sure.
Made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance, where you wait.
The plan there was to have him, like, bait him to talk about John McCain.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said the climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state
I'm so happy right now, guys.
Extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied
I am so happy right now.
Jacked up. You ask anybody who has been
wasted that Xanax,
victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue.
Great.
The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as Vice President over the last 4 years, we have invested.
Do you want to know how I know? I haven't even really been looking at conservative Twitter, but do you want to know how I know she did great? Watch the conservative response. Watch them. Watch them tonight. Watch them tomorrow. They are going to be
new
pissed.
Manufacturing jobs while
I promise you.
We have invested.
They're going to blame the moderators for sure.
That we are opening up factories around the world.
I'm not even looking. I guarantee you, they're really pissed. Ben Shapiro's pissed. Steven Crowder's pissed. Tim Pool's pissed. Rob Noor's pissed.
Of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles.
She's answering
growing what we can
policy
do
questions
around American
with
manufacturing and opening up auto
with specifics,
plants,
and she's managing to jab Trump in the meantime.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs
this
last month. It's going, they're all
She's giving substantive answers, and in those substantive answers, she's finding ways to jab him.
Owned by China.
That is deliberate.
These massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars
into
the United States.
Strategic. That was planned, and she executed on that.
What they have given to China
almost
is
perfectly.
Unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South
there's going to be a YouTube recap tomorrow, probably.
What they've done,
Mr. Editor Man is on it.
Manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Yeah, guys, she nailed it. I mean, did she murder him tonight? I think she dog walked him tonight. I don't think she murdered him, but she dog walked him. And I do think, like, I would not be surprised if we saw her polls go up after this debate. A performance, maybe A-, but A. She gets an A. And he looked frustrated. He looked angry. He looked flustered. That, my God, him saying, I don't have a plan, I have concepts for a plan. Setting aside Biden's terrible debate performance, let's just ignore that for a minute. That was one of the worst things I've ever heard in a debate. That's insane. Your job, think about this. Your job as a candidate is to come with plans. That's your job as a candidate. Your job is to tell the American people, this is the problem, and this is what I want to do about that problem. And let's also set aside the fact that Trump didn't get into any specifics at any point. He didn't go into any nuanced detail. He didn't have anything concrete. He didn't, what can we even remember? Did he mention a single policy that he wants to get done tonight? Seriously, I'm really thinking, did he say anything? She did. She listed several policies, and these policies poll well. The $25K down payment for Americans polls well. It polls well. The price gouging thing polls well. The $50,000 for small business thing polls well. The support for Israel stuff, I know this is gonna polls well. For a candidate to say, well, sir, I mean, what are you proposing for the plan? Well, I'm not president yet. I have concepts of that is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in a debate. You just subscribe. Truly. I mean, like, Really, think about that. If Biden said that, imagine if Biden said that. Imagine if Biden said that. Imagine if she said that. Imagine if Kamala said, well, you know, I'm not president yet, but I mean, I'll let you know. The election's in 7 weeks. You'll let us know. People might gloss over that, but that answer was truly one of the worst answers I have ever heard in a presidential debate. I changed my mind. I think she did murder him tonight. I mean, she dog walked him tonight. She dog walked him tonight. That was really, really impressive. That's a high pressure moment, guys. That is a high pressure moment. And she looked like she was enjoying herself. You know what I mean? That's the difference between him and her. He looked flustered. She looked like she was having fun. There were a couple moments where she sort of like slipped up on her words a couple times. Nothing major. Like that was, everybody does that. It's really difficult to find somebody like Obama who like never does that, you know, but she tripped up on her words literally like 2 times and immediately recovered. You know, she didn't lose her train of thought or anything. I think there was a missed opportunity when it came to her to the January 6th thing. I think that was a really good opportunity for her to get like kind of more aggressive because that's serious. What he did was serious. He tried to disenfranchise millions of people and steal an election. So like I wanted to see a little bit more energy on that question, but I still, all things considered, I think it was a good answer. I'm just saying my preference is I wanted to see her go a little bit more. This is how you know it went well for her, okay? The conservatives are going to be pissed and they're going to blame the moderators. Maybe don't have your candidates say that they're murdering babies after they're born. Did you consider that? And then he doesn't have to worry about getting fact checked like that. In fact, I think he's probably going to call out my prediction is he's going to call out the moderators here.
Tonight, the time has come for closing statements and Vice President
say something about it. Watch.
Begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight 2 very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us, and we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
Good.
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in
not according to the polling on her policies.
We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not.
He just looks flustered,
Germany
angry,
tried that,
not
and
composed.
within 1 year they were back to building.
And she looked so poised. Remember, I told you guys,
plants.
like she's just
we're
so
not ready
poised,
for it.
bro.
We can't sacrifice our country.
She's really
for the sake
good at
of
keeping her
vision.
calm. She did so good at that tonight, bro. She did not get upset once.
She do it? We're a
Literally
failing
once.
nation.
She didn't lose composure
We're
a single
that's
time.
in serious decline.
Not once.
We're being laughed
and she's
at
up there
all
against
over the
Donald
world.
Trump,
All over the world,
bro.
they're laughing.
Most
I know the leaders
obnoxious
very
man
well.
in
They're
history.
coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president,
it's just another campaign rally rant. He just doesn't, and you know what I mean? It's just
of our country.
President
that
Trump,
was your closing statement?
You. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center.
Oh, man.
I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the...
I want to talk to the boys about this. That was really, really, really good. Really good. Really good.
You just subscribe.
I can't believe I was nervous. I feel stupid for feeling nervous. What I do is like, I feel like I give you guys honest analysis. Like I told you guys, I'm like, I think she's going to do really well against him. And I meant it. I had full confidence in it. And then the day came and I got so nervous before this debate, like 2 hours. I'm just going to chalk that up to PTSD from Biden. She was so poised. She was so poised. I thought it was really good when she walked out and it was like real alpha looking right at him, maintaining eye contact. He was kind of looking down a little bit. You know, he looked at her when they shook hands, but then she went to the podium and then she just looked at him. She just stared at him. And little things like that matter. Body language matters. It really matters. People pay attention to that stuff. And so it was particularly pronounced in the first 10, 15 minutes. Every time he was speaking, she never looked away from him. I mean, that's not true. She would kind of like look around, kind of like roll her eyes a little bit, but probably 90% of the time she was staring right at him. And when she was giving her answers, he was just sitting there going like this. You know, doing that stuff. She did a really good job of, as I mentioned before, Econoboi is going to come on. I'm gonna shoot it with him.
What's up?
What's
Mr.
up,
Hutchinson?
man? What did you, were you watching it?
I indeed was watching it. I just got done watching it with everyone else.
What were your thoughts?
You know, I think that, I tend to think that presidential debates don't really, like they really don't matter that much. I think that
gonna win.
I think that the Biden debate was probably a good sort of test case for my general philosophy is that there's a lot of downside risk potential. Like if you really just like completely shit the bed in a debate, you could have a pretty rough sort of resulting polling. But especially in our polarized times, I think you have a lot of liberty to mess up or to perhaps, you know, like have more radical rhetoric if you want, because most people are pretty locked in. Now, one interesting poll that I did see before this debate, I think it was from CNN, was amongst undecided voters between the two candidates, who do you need to see more of before you make a decision?
It was Kamala.
And I think about half of undecided voters said they need to see more from Kamala, and only about a fifth said they need to see more from Trump.
Yeah.
So she had more potential in this debate. I think overall she did fine. You know, I think she pretty much met expectations. She was definitely a little shaky in the first like 10 minutes. She seemed a little shaky in the first 10 minutes to me, but I think she did pretty well. I think she cooked him on the abortion thing. She baited him super hard on the crowd size thing. That was hilarious to see that actually work in real time.
Yeah.
And I think that she did a pretty good job mixing in like her own plans with attacks on Donald Trump. One of the members of your chat points out, listen, I don't have plans. I've got concepts, but you know, we got to figure it out. We got to figure it out, this healthcare thing. It's like, that's hilarious. Trump's a doofus, but he's always been a doofus. So
wait, no,
it's kind of priced in. What
you're underselling it a little bit. I mean, it's hilarious. Yes. That was one of the worst answers I've ever heard a presidential candidate give.
Yeah, but it's priced in, right? Like, I don't think that's moving the needle, right?
I don't know. I mean, I think that clip is probably, I think people are going to be talking about that clip because that's crazy for a presidential candidate to get up there and say, well, I'm not president. You know, I'll let you know when I have a plan. We have concepts of. Imagine if Kamala said that.
Well, Kamala's held to a higher standard for a number of reasons. I'm just talking about like expectations and reaction to this. This is a guy who won in 2016. His plan to defeat ISIS was literally, I can't tell you the plan. It's secret. And he
could have said that, you know, like, this is different.
Like, that's crazy. No, Hutch, I agree. Like, it's crazy to say that, but it's Trump.
Yeah. Oh, what's up, guys? Yo, what'd you think?
Econoboi is a little, Pisco? He's a little tepid on it. I think that was tepid? I think that was a dog walk.
I think it was a dog walk, dude.
Yeah.
I
really? Okay.
Yeah, I do. Because listen, I think it was a nervy start just based on optics, visually.
We agree on that.
Wait, why are you guys saying that? I did not see what you saw. She was like maybe a little stiff, but she still looked like poised. She was super.
She was a little bit stiff, and
she seemed a little nervous. Is all I'm saying. She just seemed a little bit like.
Yeah, she stumbled over her like words a little bit.
But she got over it quickly, Hutch, and then she gained her confidence like steadily, and then immediately then she was fine. Like, it was just she started speaking first, and that can always, you know, get on your nerves. And like, think about the weight of, oh my God, democracy is on my is literally on my shoulders.
Yeah,
I have to make sure I don't up a single word. So like, I understand it, but on every substantive point, she was baiting him with everything, like, and he bit every single bait, like every single bait. It was so glorious.
Yes, that was what Econoboi was saying. And if you want to, I don't reiterate the point, but like, it's obvious that her strategy, her debate prep team, their strategy was get your policy out, but then jab him and put him on the defense and bait him, and then stay composed the whole time.
Yep.
And she gets an A+ for that. She just 100% perfectly executed on that. He looked angry, rattled. It was just, when you heard him talk, it was just the same campaign rally nonsense, you know?
I totally agree that was a strategy. Like, people were, why didn't she answer the question? That's not what this game's about, bro. And first of all, you know, she tried to keep it somewhat topical. She was more topical than Trump was. And I think in terms of like, no one can go at her for like not answering questions more or less than Trump. Trump was like literally saying random shit, just like he always does. But I do think it was a deliberate strategy to go towards a modular talking point and that is responsive somewhat to the question, and then bait him into saying crazy shit. And that's what happened. And that's exactly how this went down. And I thought it was excellent. I thought it was masterful. I would give her like an 88 probably in terms of everything. But that for me, you know, Trump gets an F-, he gets a 20. And so the differential there is like quite positive.
Yeah, I think a B+ is kind of where I'd say I'm on the same page. The only reason I'm saying that it's not going to change much is just because I don't think it was such a standout performance that she's going to like gain 3 points in the polls or something like that. Like, I think it's pretty much a meets expectations performance for me, and I would suspect that the polls probably don't really move very much as a result of this. I'd be surprised if they did.
I'm a little bit more bullish, I have to say, but you know, who knows? A lot of people are already like baked in, and so in terms of my priors would probably be with you, Econoboi, just based on like, I think you are drawing on history and the notion that like really how much this is going to move the way for people, as well as I guess your prior that the debate was just like meets expectations. And so I'm a little bit more bullish. I think that you might see some movement, 1-2 points, something like that. I don't know, but we'll see.
I think that her best line in the debate, and I'd be curious what you guys' opinion is on the best line. I loved it when she said, I invite you guys to watch a Donald Trump rally. He talks about Hannibal Lecter, and she really like brought it into the mainstream, because I thought Trump did better than I thought he would. Now, like Pisco said, it's still a failure of a performance, like in nominal terms, let's say. But I don't know, man. Like, Trump, he really you know, a lot of his rally, he's so meandering in all of these, you know, maybe it's just because he does so many interviews and it's just, you know, 5% of the time he sounds completely ridiculous. But he held it together in this debate a little bit more than I thought he would personally.
Really? I think you might have Trump arrangement syndrome.
Trump arrangement, yeah.
Well, I don't know what the thing is. You and I, Econoboi, in the last 2 weeks, we've just been like missing each other in terms of what, in terms of our ideas. But like, no, I think that I would tend to agree. I think at the beginning I was a little bit worried because he did seem more cogent at the start, but he just says things in a way that seems confident. But if you actually listen to the words, I feel like they're all meandering and unhinged. But again, I defer to you guys. I'm also like not a representative sample.
I mean, I do think the no crowd. I do think the no crowd hurts him a lot because it does force people to really just like sit with what Trump is saying and not really be influenced necessarily by the jeers of an audience. I'm actually, I mean, it is Trump, but I am kind of shocked. The most deranged thing he said was when he was talking about the conspiracy about Haitian immigrants eating people's pets.
Yeah.
Like when he was saying that, I was like, there can't be a human that hears this and thinks, oh yeah, no, that's not completely deranged. Like that's such a deranged talking point.
Or I'll ask Econoboi and Hutch, what did you think about the abortion answer? I thought the abortion answer was a bloodbath.
I think that was her strongest moment in the debate, singular strongest moment.
Add in the Affordable Care Act. I don't know, Hutch, what are your thoughts?
I think you guys are underselling her performance a little bit.
Oh, wow.
I said A-, so I guess we're not that far off.
Yeah.
But listen, I think there's a couple things to consider. First of all, you already touched on it. She stepped into literally the most high pressure situation in the world.
Yeah.
But by taking over this debate. If that was me in that spot, I would have crumbled. The fact that she had so much pressure on her, especially after Biden's last debate, like she had so much more to lose from this debate than he did. Like she really needed to show up tonight. Yeah. And I think if she would have lost the debate, I think you might have seen more movement in the polls because her polling right now is just way more malleable than his. And if he loses the debate, I'm not sure he's going to lose too much. I do want to touch on that after I'm done with this, but I think she put on a masterclass. There was not a single question that she was not prepared for. There was not a single question that she up. She tripped over her words like maybe 2 times and immediately recovered. She showed tremendous discipline, poise. She took shots at really opportune times. She, just like you said, Pisco, she would give these detailed answers about policy and she would get into specifics and she would tactically find a way to jab him as she was doing that. And what did that do? It would go over to him and for half of his answer, instead of he's attacking her because she's the incumbent, like that's typically like you're on full offense against an incumbent. But she was able to, with every single answer, she was able to bait him into spending like a minute, and they only get 2 minutes at a time. So he's spending like a minute and a half, sometimes the full 2 minutes defending himself.
Yeah, and how do you pick up on policy after that? How do you remember like what the policy question was after you're like just going off about Orban and all this? I totally agree, Hutch, that it throws him off his game, and it allows her to stick to talking points and not really get pushed. It really seemed like Donald Trump was on the defensive the whole time. And, say what you want to say about the moderation, but whatever. I thought that there were some questions there that were tricky for Harris. I liked the way she handled the fracking question, which is, hey, and it kind of plays into the notion that they're like, why haven't you done it yet, right? They want to have their cake and eat it too. They'd be like, why haven't you done all your plan yet? But she kind of threw it back and was like, hey, I haven't banned fracking. You know I'm not going to ban fracking. We've expanded it. I thought that was a good answer. And anyone who's like, but explain the pivot, explain the change. You don't do that. You don't dwell on like, yeah, I made a mistake. You would never do that. But sorry.
So I want to say now, I just realized I do have a favorite answer. I think her answer on Afghanistan was the most masterful way to answer that question. Now that's like a vulnerability for the administration. And so she had to prepare for like really tricky questions. She handled it perfectly. She she used that opportunity to go after Trump for his horrible deal that he negotiated with the Taliban. And she delivered it with such confidence, and she was so assertive in that answer. That's like the perfect example of taking a really tricky question, because that's a vulnerability for her. She's tied to the Biden administration. but she handled it perfectly. And she put him on the defense. She said, you were weak in your negotiations. You let out 5,000 Taliban. These people were terrorists. You didn't even include the Afghan national government. This is your fault. And then what did he do? That's ridiculous. And he defended himself for and then they moved past it. So she guys, I don't know how you don't give this an A. Hassan gave it an 8.5 out of 10. So we're probably underselling. She probably gets a 10 based on that metric alone, right?
Like if Hassan gave it an 8.5, you know, that's your strongest data point for this being a perfect performance. I think that Trump's weakest, I think the moment that he looked the weakest in the debate, and I don't know the impact that this will have. This was just the moment where I was like, man, I'm actually surprised. It's one of the It's one of the extremely few times that you don't see Trump like double down. And it was actually the question on the weird accusation he has of like Kamala pretending to be black or like turning black at a strategic point or whatever. Yeah. Where he was like, look, I mean, black, whatever, it's not a big deal. Like he didn't really, it wasn't the typical double down. And it was like waffle. I'm not really sure. Like, I don't know if he realized that he fucked up with that or if it's like he didn't expect to get asked that question or what. But he actually looked pretty weak on that question. And I guess to be fair, obviously, it's like, how do you possibly defend yourself when you say something like that? It's so crazy. And I think she did pretty well as well. You know, she didn't take the bait in some regards. And I think that's been consistent this whole campaign of like not taking the bait on race politics or gender politics or anything like that, and just trying to refocus it on being a generally sort of uniting figure. And that's probably a good strategy. Overall, though, no, I mean, I think it was a good performance. It does kind of weird me out that we're ending the debate season with the VP debate. I just don't know if that's ever happened before. It seems like typically the VP debate's like in the middle, and then we have another presidential debate on the back, and maybe we'll have another one. But that is kind of weird to me, because it does make me wonder, like, will the VP debate have an outsized impact on the election if it's the last debate that we see?
He's not. Do you guys think he's debating again after this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Pisco left the call. He might have had something he had to do, but here's my answer. Ultimately, if he's down in the polls, he'll want to do another debate. But I think this election will be close enough, consistently enough, that he won't think a debate will be that valuable. So I'm going to say probably not. I mean, what do you think?
I really don't think he's going to want to go through that again, because I mean, you could just tell that was not a fun experience for him. Like, you could tell that really took everything in him to get through that debate. That was my perception of the debate, was like he was just trying to get through it, and she was playing chess. Like, she was setting up the pieces, she was attacking the center, she was like preparing for future attacks, and he was just trying to get through it. And
I was gonna say, I think you guys raised a good point though on putting him on the defensive, because now that I think of it, like some of the mainline attacks in the media on Kamala and her plans, they didn't even come up. Like, Trump didn't even bring him up. Like the whole like communist price controls thing, he never brought that up from what I can recall. He didn't bring up the whole like, taxing unrealized capital gains. Like, he never brought that up. He did call her a Marxist, but like that was pretty much it. It wasn't really I guess the substantive attacks that he had were mostly had to do with the Biden administration. But I mean, at the end of the day, she can always just say, I'm not Joe Biden, I'm like a whole different person. So,
wait, we just got some breaking news.
People are saying Taylor.
Shut the up.
Shut the door. To believe it.
Hold on. I want a link. Give me a link. Here's what she said.
On IG.
Oh, let's
go to T Swift's IG right now.
That's the nuke right there. That's the nuke right there, boys. Hold on. How do I do?
Wow. You know what's crazy? You know what's crazy about that, Hutch? Is that had to be planned. Like, they planned this, I bet. They're like, right after the debate.
Taylor said, like many of you, I watched the debate tonight. If you haven't already, now is a great time to do your research on the issues at hand and the stances these candidates take on the topics that matter to you the most. As a voter, I make sure to watch and read everything I can about their proposed policies and plans for this country. Recently, I was made aware that AI of me falsely endorsing Donald Trump's presidential run was posted to his site. It really conjured up my fears around AI and the dangers of spreading misinformation. It brought me to the conclusion that I need to be very transparent about my actual plans for this election as a voter. The simplest way to combat misinformation is with the truth. I will be casting my vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the 2024 presidential election. I'm voting for Kamala Harris because she fights for the rights and causes I believe need a warrior to champion them. I think she's a steady-handed, gifted leader, and I believe we can accomplish so much more in this country if we are led by calm and not chaos. I was so heartened and impressed by her selection of running mate Tim Walz, who's been standing up for LGBTQ+ rights, IVF, and women's right to her own body for decades. I've done my research and I've made my choice. Your research is all yours to do, and the choice is yours to make. I also want to say, especially to first-time voters, remember that in order to vote, you have to be registered. I also find it's much easier to vote early. I'll link where to register and find early voting dates info in my story. With love and hope, Taylor Swift, childless cat lady. Wow.
Wow. That's actually great, dude. She scheduled this post. She scheduled this post to come out at exactly 11 EST, like an hour or so, like 30 minutes after the debate. This is so well timed. They totally planned this because now the momentum as well. It's like a story of like, oh, the momentum's now back on Kamala's side with sliding in the polls. I'm shocked that Taylor came out and endorsed in the first place, but what she's got to pull a Lady Gaga. She's got to do like a free concert or something. She's got to do something bigger. Hopefully, that's actually pretty great. I'm actually really curious what the impact of Taylor Swift's endorsement will be.
Look, you know, you guys were saying that you doubt that this debate made much of an impact. Right now, basically all seven swing states are within the margin of error. She's got a little bit more of a comfortable lead in Michigan and Wisconsin. Pennsylvania is very close. Yep. North Carolina, very close. Georgia, very close. Arizona, very close. We're talking 0.5 points for all 4 of these other Sunbelt states. Nevada, very close. And when the margins are as close as they are, something like a debate performance like the one that she gave tonight can make a difference. I'm not going to sit here and definitively tell you I think for sure this put her over the edge, but I think if she wins by a really small margin in November, I think we can probably credit this debate as being instrumental.